Welcome, Safiya. I'm so pleased that you're here. This is really exciting.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm quite excited to be here as well.
Yeah, so I can't wait for this conversation. So as you know, the podcast is Smash Your Own Ceiling, so I can't wait to just hear your journey and learn more about you and how you got to where you are today. So where do you want to kick off from? What's a great starting point for you?
That's such a good question. I've been thinking about this since I sort of, decided to schedule the time to talk. But I think probably for me, it would be at the end.
At the end.
Not at the end, but like close to the end when I self-published my first book. I would say.
Amazing. And when did that happen?
2019, September.
So we're in November 2021 now.
Yeah.
You should hear listening this on replay, and you're far into the future, maybe. Who knows? So a good couple of years ago, did you self-publish? Did you say?
Yes, I did.
So tell me about that book.
Yeah, so I always wanted to write a book. I always, like, from the time I remember being a teenager and saying to my English teacher, like, I'm gonna write a book, would you help me get it published? And he was like, sure. I'm not sure if he was just, adults humor children, it happens. So I'm not sure if he was actually humoring me, although I'm pretty sure that he would have helped if the situation had presented itself. But I've always wanted to do it, but I always thought it was going to be like this epic Lord of the Rings. Like I really expected to write this epic, fictional epic. And I always say like it was going to be so epic that it was going to need its own book for you just to be able to understand it. It was going to be that epic.
Amazing.
Like, that was the plan.
Go, love it.
That did not happen. Or I should say it hasn't happened yet. It may still happen, who knows? But I'm not so, like, I'm quite pleased with what I eventually did, which I don't think I sort of had expected to do at all, because when I got to a certain age and I hadn't written any book at all, I just started to think like, maybe I'm not going to write a book. Maybe that's not for me. Maybe that's for other people. It'll be fine. So I'd sort of pretty much given up on the idea. So I started a blog just before I turned 40. I started a blog about the 39 lessons I learned before I turned 40, because I developed a real love for writing nonfiction over the years. I did a lot of traveling. I live in Barbados right now, grew up in Barbados, but I actually studied and worked in England. So while I was in the UK, I did a fair amount of traveling, some for leisure, some for voluntary work, different various things. And whenever I would travel, the very first time I traveled, I had an amazing time. I went to Eastern Europe with a friend from university and it was brilliant. And 6 months later, I was like, I don't remember anything. Like, I can't even remember the countries that we went to. What is wrong with my brain? Yeah. And so the next time I travel, I was like, I'm gonna keep a log of what we do and where we go. That is actually how I got into writing nonfiction, like real life. So I started emailing it to my friends, and I just had like a little newsletter of like, you're my friend, you'll probably get this email from me saying like, I'm in this place and this is what we did. And I did a lot of that with my best friend. So we did a lot of cataloging and traveling. And 1 year after we made like a really big trip, she put together the pictures and all the emails that I wrote into this book. And it was like, oh, my first book. And I was like, oh, maybe this is the only book I'll ever publish. But I really realized how much I really enjoyed writing nonfiction. So I decided to start this blog. It was just like, okay, it's going to be the 39 lessons I learned before I turned 40. And that I started about maybe 4.5, almost 5 years ago now. And I still blog to this day. So that's how I started writing nonfiction. And that's what led me after I had done the whole blog series. And I was like, this is a lot of words. Yeah, I could probably write a book. Whereas I'd never even imagined that I could do it before. It sort of gave me a different idea about what it would take to put ideas down in that format. And so, yeah, I self-published my first book.
Amazing.
I wrote it yeah, I wrote it early in 2019.
Amazing.
And yeah, by the end of the year, I published it.
So I've got so many questions.
Sure.
First of all, what I want to ask is, what's your book called?
The book is called, that first book is called Everything is a Thing, and it's my journey to leading a truly authentic life. So it's on Amazon, it's on my website. Yeah, it was just so much fun. I met some great people. You and I have a mutual connection, who was my editor.
Yes. And Chris is my editor too. So
yes, she edited that book for me. So that is how you and I met.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was just such a great experience. I feel like it was just, you know, we may or may not get to what I do now, but I also help people write books. And one of the reasons is because I feel like it's such a transformation, like writing a book, and not just writing it, but writing it, publishing it, sharing it with the world. It is like so transformational.
It really is. It really is.
I can't even explain it. It's like magic. It's like actual magic. And
it really is.
It's such a great experience. So yeah.
I know. So the book is called Everything is a Thing.
Yes.
I will put the link in the show notes. And I just want to we mentioned Chris. So Chris Emery is our mutual book editor and friend. So I'll put Chris as well in the show notes, just so
please do.
She's awesome. Give her a big shout out. And she's actually coming on the podcast as well, which is really exciting.
Can't wait.
I've got so many questions. I just want to kind of jump back. I do want to talk about how the journey of self-publishing, because you're right, it is magic. It is transformational. It's a personal development journey in itself, isn't it? Creating that.
For sure.
Yeah. So we will definitely talk about that, because I'm sure we've got loads of things that we can chat about. But before that, I love that you started by creating a blog. That's exactly how I started in terms of my writing journey as well.
I love that.
But it's a great starting point, isn't it? Especially when you might think, I've got a book that I want to do, or at some point I want to write a book, but you don't know whether you can do it because it feels daunting.
It does. And a part of the reason I like the blog, and I mean, there's, you know, I even have a few people, clients and friends now, who they may not want to do the whole like starting a website or whatever. And there's so many platforms you can use now to kind of share your work. But for me, I think that step of writing and sharing your work and building that muscle is so critical in the writing a book step. I'm not saying you cannot write a book without having ever started a blog or shared your work in some way. But I think it's very difficult to do if you haven't built that sort of muscle of like sharing your work, realizing like, people will read it. I probably won't have a heart attack and die. Like, that's interesting.
And that's the thing, that people won't, people are going to read it.
Yeah. And it also builds your skill, right? It builds your skill writing, getting in the habit of writing, getting in the habit of sharing, realizing how to connect with people through your writing by sort of just building up that skill of like writing a blog or writing articles or something. I think a lot of people that I know who've written a book, even if they haven't started a blog, they've shared their work in some way before. And that really helps, I think, build a skill around the skills that you need to write and share that book, to write and publish that book. Because the truth of the matter is it plays with your mind when you think about people reading something that you wrote. And if you've already started that process in a really small way, I feel like it helps build that courage as well.
I completely agree. I think you're right when you describe it as a muscle, that you just have to stretch and practice that muscle. It's not so much the writing part, it's the
sharing.
It's the sharing part.
The sharing, yeah.
I remember when I published my book, and it was a good few years ago now. And when the first person bought it, and I actually said to my husband, how do I get it back? And he's like, you don't get it back.
I'm going to tell you, that exact same thing happened to me. This is going to sound ridiculous, but I I grew up in the church, and for various reasons, I don't go so much anymore, if at all. But when I was at university, I was very involved in church, and I had a lot of friends that are still friends to this day. And as soon as I put the book out for pre-order, they're all like, pre-order, and I was just like, so do I need to take out that chapter where I talk about leaving the church? Like, do I need, like, all of a sudden I realized, like, and they were, you know, it was just amazing to me. Like, these were the people who were like, literally, they were the ones who messaged me and told me the link isn't working, the pre-order, like, you know, they were the first in. And all I could think was like, so how many of these chapters do I need to take out before they,
before they get it?
Like, maybe it'll just be a booklet by the time I send it to them. And it, you know, it really plays with your mind. It really does.
It really does. I was talking to a friend, I think a couple of weeks ago, actually, and she's just published her book. And she said one of the biggest lessons for her was recognizing that the book no longer belongs to you once it goes out. Oh, and I loved that. I wish somebody had taught me that. It's not yours anymore. You've written it. It doesn't belong to you. You have to let it go, because I can't even, I could write a book of how much it messed with my mind that people were buying it. I'm like, oh my God, what's in it? What are they going to say? Well, you know, and just visualizing it on other people's bookshelves. I thought I'd be excited about it, but it really terrified me.
And I think that's one of the things you don't realize, those fears, right? That like you have, that you're kind of torn between the fear that nobody's ever going to read it ever, and the fear that people are actually going to read it. It's like, you just can't win, because you're like, oh my gosh, what if nobody reads it? And then somebody buys it and you're like, no, actually, I know I was afraid that no one was going to read it, but I really actually don't want anybody. Let me just, can I get that back, please?
Yeah.
And it doesn't belong to you. And the other thing I've been thinking about recently, I'm kind of writing a bunch of blogs for next year, for my business next year. I just need to batch. So I've been writing a load of them. And one of them, I was talking about the fact that the book doesn't just not belong to you. Sometimes it belongs to a version of you, right? Sometimes you'll move. Sometimes you will think, you know, there's so many authors I've heard who said, like, they look back at that first book and they were like cringing a little bit, because maybe of something that they said that they may no longer agree with, or even just the way they said it. But the thing is, like, I don't think that minimizes what it is. I think that's the perfection that makes people afraid to kind of publish sometimes, because they feel like, because they know it's no longer theirs, they want to make sure that everything that they write there will stand for all time. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. Like, you kind of have to do it sometimes and realize that, like, that book was for that time and another book maybe for another time, and go from there.
That is such a good tip. Do you think that comes from, you know, this day and age where, you know, because we're blogging and because we could go into our blog, both of us today, and edit something if it's no longer relevant,
easily
delete it, unpublish. I've done it, you know.
I have done it.
I've changed, I've evolved. It no longer, I don't believe that anymore. I'm changing it. And so we've got the opportunity to keep updating. Whereas with a book, we have to literally let it go. It's cemented, isn't it? It's a snapshot in time.
Yeah. I think that that's true. It's true of even social media. I think there's so much of your ability to kind of curate what you put out there, even after you've already put it out there. I mean, there's screenshots or whatever, but like, there's a big ability to sort of curate things. But also, I don't, and this is just a personal thing, which, you know, if it's too much of a tangent, just bring me back in, because I do that sometimes. But it also makes me think about the fact that I don't know if I really believe in erasing past versions of things that have happened. It doesn't change it. It doesn't change what you believed then. It's still, on a personal level, something that I used to believe made me the person that I am today. So not really sure how I feel about deleting it, but even on a larger scale, when I think about, and this is just about books in general, you know, there's so many books, films that were made at a particular moment in history and time that now so much about what they're about, so, you know, a lot of what they say would no longer be acceptable. I don't believe in erasing that either, because I feel like we can't learn from those things if we just pretend that they're not there.
Yeah,
right?
if we keep rubbing it out, if we keep it,
keep erasing it, you know. And so I think in some ways we need to have that thing that represents that time, that moment in time, that version of the writer. You know, for me personally, I look back at that book now, I'm not sure I would write it now. In fact, I've written a number of books that, and there's another nonfiction one I wrote about well-being, and sometimes I look back at it and I'm like, God, I miss that girl who wrote that book. Like, where is she now?
Where is she? Yeah.
But I really appreciate it for what it is. And like I said, that may be a tangent, but that's just how I feel about it. I think what I'm trying to say is, like, don't let that stop you from putting something out there. Otherwise you never will.
You never will. And it's so lovely to see people as a work in progress. So yeah. I love reading books, several books from the same author, and you can see them improving. You can see how just they've evolved as a person, as a writer, as a thinker. And that's lovely to go on that journey. And when you start that journey with them, you might be at that place, you know, rather than, so it's nice to just evolve with a writer, I think.
It is, and I think it reminds you that you can be that person too. You're also a work in progress, and so you don't have to reach that perfection pinnacle height of being this person before you put that book or that story or whatever out into the world. Like, you're allowed to write and evolve and become a different person as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, there's a lot of fear attached to writing your book, but that's where the fun is. That's where the transformation is, isn't it? So let's talk about that transformation, because you said that it was, and I know this is part of your work, supporting other people to write their books too, which I love. I love this mission so much. But let's look at what your transformation was. So, you know, obviously you were a writer anyway, you had this big goal, but how did it change you? What did you learn?
I think one of the things I learned so many things. Like, I've written about it so much, because, and every time I reflect on it, I even think about more things that I learned. I think one of the things that I learned was that, and there's this quote that I love from Stephen King, and he always says, the best stories write themselves. But I'm like, even the mediocre stories write themselves. Even the true stories write themselves. Like, to me, I feel like sometimes stories have a mind of their own. It's a bit of a quirky kind of way to look at it. But I think I learned that, like, I started that book with an idea of what I wanted it to be. And the book has its own idea of what it wants to be. And as you're writing, it will change. It will change. Your ideas about what you want it to be will change. And that is a part of the process. I think for me, I imagine, like, you map out this book and it's like, chapter 1 is going to be about this, and chapter 2 is going to be about that. Like, and then ping, you sit on front of the computer and there you are typing, and then all of a sudden, cha-ching, it's out there. But I think as much as you know what, or you think you know what the book is going to be when you start, it will change as you write. The ideas will change. And that's part of the reason why I always tell people, like, don't, you know, there's some people who write and they get stuck on that first page or in that first paragraph, trying to perfect it. And I'm like, don't do that, because part of the reason it might sound wrong is because it might not even belong there. It might belong in chapter 8, and you won't know that until you get to chapter 8. So the best thing for you to do is to write forward. Right. And that's something that I learned, and I share all the time, is like, write forward. You can't perfect something as you're writing. You need to write it all, and then you can bring it all, it'll come together by the end. It won't be a together thing at the beginning. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things I learned probably about writing. In terms of personal transformation, I think it was just realizing that there was no difference. Like, I always tell people the only difference between you and somebody who did something is that they did it. Like, I always thought
that there is quotable. Go and quote Safiya. The only difference between you and somebody else is that they wrote it.
Yes, they wrote it, right? They did it, right? And they did it probably a lot more imperfectly than you think. Mm-hmm. You look at the finished product and you think, oh my gosh, I have to write a book that sounds like that, or I have to be a certain person to finish this project. But you just need to, what you actually need to do is finish it and put it out there. It's, and I think it's just remembering that, sometimes you put people up on a pedestal, which is part of the reason why I do, as we were talking earlier about going on the journey with the writer. I love that because it makes you realize, like, they're just a normal person too on their journey. You're just a normal person too on your journey. And so it was just kind of getting that more of the acceptance of, like, I don't have to be some special magical unicorn to do this thing. Like, all I have to do is keep taking the steps, even when I'm scared, even when I'm worried, keep taking the steps. And just finishing it made me realize, like, you can finish stuff. You can finish stuff if you just keep going. I know it sounds really simple and I'm probably minimizing it, but that was, to me, that made a huge difference. I feel like I've finished so many things since then, just from the realization of what it actually requires of you to finish something. So many gems in there, Safiya. So I just want to kind of pick this to pieces, what you've just said, because I don't want to capture it. Firstly, excuse me, I love that you said about the difference between somebody else is that they did it. And this is the thing that with anything, it's just about doing it. It's about taking action. It's about just putting yourself out there and knowing that it doesn't have to be perfect, and that it is, and that no matter whether, all the imperfections, it's still going to serve somebody. I mean, and sometimes I look at my book and I cringe a little bit because it's, a few years old now, and would I write it today? No. But I still get messages. Saying, thank you for this. This is exactly what I needed right now. So it's serving a purpose, which is just wonderful. So there's that, just giving yourself permission, isn't there? About you have to finish this. This is your gift to the world, and you can finish things. Yeah. And I think once you do that, like the year that I finished it, I was like, I wrote a book. What's that about? Could I write another? And then I was like, could I write another book? So just for a joke, I joined NaNoWriMo, which I don't like, unless you're a writing nerd, you have no idea what I'm talking about, but it's this community in November every year where you write a whole book in November. And for years, I was like, I want to do NaNoWriMo. I was like, you can't write a book, and you definitely can't write one in a month, so don't be crazy now. But having written that book, I was like, I wonder if I could write another book. So I joined NaNoWriMo, and I made the decision, like, I actually just wanted to write a book that was just fun. So I was like, it's going to be a love story because, it's really easy, because it's boy meets girl, some kind of, drama happens, and then happily ever after at the end. Like, it's pretty straightforward. I don't have to worry about plots or whatever. Like, I can just write this book just so I can see if I write another one. And talking about giving yourself permission, I think that was the gift that the first book gave me, is that I felt like I had the permission to write things the way I wanted to write it. So I thought to myself, like, I really like writing letters. I love writing letters. I talked about the emails I used to send to my friends earlier, but all through college, all through university, everything. My best friend who lives in the States and still does, we would write letters, emails back and forth. This is even before emails. I'm that age. Don't judge.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah. I'm with you. Letters, emails, you name it. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I wanted to write a book about this friendship between these two best friends that lived in different places, and the story would be told through the letters that they wrote one another. But I also had always had this secret desire to be an agony aunt. So I was like, the main character is also going to be an agony aunt, and she's going to be answering these questions. So the book is called 10 Lessons About Love. And so they're she's the agony aunt. People write into her, ask her questions about love. She answers them. And then she's also writing her best friend, and they're both navigating their own relationships. It was the most fun I have ever had in my whole entire life. And that came from the first book, that permission to like, you can do whatever you want. You can finish a book. Of course you can finish a book. Of course you can write with it. Like, it doesn't, you know, I can't even, I don't know, it probably sounds ridiculous, but like that confidence, that courage, that whatever it took for me to get through that first book has taken me through so many other projects.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It just carries you through, because no matter what happens, you've written a book. You've written 2 books. How many books have you written now?
4 and 1 really terrible draft that I've never looked back at, so we don't even talk about that.
Yes, 4 books, and that's you. Yeah, that's just who you are. Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
It's so lovely to see yourself, isn't it? And look back and think, thank you to it's just be grateful to my past self.
That version of myself.
Yeah.
Like I said, even if I wouldn't write that book again, it doesn't matter. I'm now a different person because I wrote that book. Does it mean that I will always finish every book I write? No. Does it mean that I won't write a really terrible draft that nobody ever talks about? No. But it does mean that somewhere in me is the ability to do that thing.
Yes. And I just want to pick up on what you said about your book evolving. So as you write it, and I know a few people have said to me, and they've asked the question, how do you write your book, and how do you know what to write when you sat down, and how does it take shape? And I remember one of my biggest light bulb moments when I was writing mine was how much it changed. It was just as you've described. It was, my end result was not the book that I started to write. It just became the book that I finished. You know, it literally just evolved, and halfway through you thought, oh, this is new. That, you know, I'm different for the first time. This is I've not seen you before. And it's such a lovely process to be part of.
It really is. And just knowing, like, I try to tell people that, because I think people think there's something wrong with them if they feel like they're going off track.
Yes.
They feel like, okay, I'm going off track. I need to get back on track. And so sometimes what happens is they try to get back to that really rigid outline that they had before, and they get stuck. They get writer's block because they're kind of so focused on it being what they think it should be. When I'm like, look, books have a mind of their own, okay? Like, you just sometimes need to hold on and let that thing take you where it needs to take you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So true. And how did you, what was your process for writing? Did you write every day? Did you, because I'm so curious and so interested. I was listening to an interview with Gay Hendricks, you know, who wrote Big Leap.
Big Leap, yeah.
And he was saying on this interview, on this podcast, that he writes in a chunk of time in the morning. He gets up really early, probably about 5 o'clock, maybe earlier, I can't remember, and he just writes. I was never able to write in chunks, you know, have a full day. What was your process?
It varies. I am very much an early morning writer, simply because my brain is working so much better in the morning. And also I think I have a lot less resistance in the morning. Like when I wake up, like, it's also when I try to go to the gym, or if I have to cook, like anything that may face any resistance at all, first thing in the morning before your brain realizes what's going on, that's what works for me. Yeah. So I would get up in the morning and write. But I also can write it like in the 10 minutes in between things. I can also go and sit on the beach and write for 20 minutes. Like, once I'm deep into a project, I feel like I may start off like getting up in the morning, writing, but then if I'm out during the day and an idea comes to me and I've got my phone, then okay, I'm gonna just jot down a few things now. So I tend to use the time that I have while I am in the midst of a project. And so, yeah, it really depends. I'm not somebody who needs like a 4-hour window or whatever. Like, I can get it in the morning and write for half an hour or an hour and be fine. But it doesn't even have to be an hour. It could be 10 minutes. It could be 20 minutes, whatever. And yeah, so I kind of, once the project really takes hold, then I can write morning, evening, during the day, 10 minutes at lunchtime, on the bus. Like it seems to just be writing itself. Yeah. So yeah, that's definitely what happens when I'm writing it, when I'm deep into a project like that.
Yeah. I think I remember I gave myself the goal every single day to just write 50 words. And I think I would go to bed until I'd written 50 words. And you never write 50 words. You always write 1,000 words or 2,000, you write a big chunk. So 50 was always my minimum, and it felt so achievable. It didn't, I never worried about it because it was
lovely. Yeah, it's great.
So let's have a bit of a switch up, Safiya, and do our quick fire round. So I do this to everybody just for a bit of fun, where I just ask you any question that pops into my head and just see what comes up. Are you game? Are you up for it?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready.
Right. So what kind of books do you like to read?
All sorts. I like, it depends on my mood. Sometimes I'm in the mood for something really predictable. There's a particular author who shall remain nameless who's written a series of books that I have to say the last one surprised me a bit, but a series of books that I have always found to be super predictable. And it's kind of like a guy out in the middle of the US is on a bus or a train or whatever, and he runs into a mystery that needs to be solved, and somehow he solves it. He's just that guy. At the end of the book, gets back on the train, bus, and goes somewhere else. And so that whole mystery thing, so police mysteries, that type of mystery, I love those. But then I also like books that are like funny and witty, and you really get to know about humanity. Like one book that I've been thinking about a lot recently is called The Humans by Matt Haig. I really like Matt Haig, and it was sometimes when I read it, it just made me think so much about humanity and about people and how strange we all are. And so things that make you think like that. And I belong to a fiction book club. So then there's also the books that, are recommended by whoever in the book club, and just having books that maybe surprise me, something from another culture. And I like nonfiction. I like to learn stuff. I'm a nerd, so like everything on the scale. Like, I'm not a huge, I do read fantasy as well. I'm not a huge fan of like vampires and stuff like that, but fantasy, that sort of fiction, I like that too. So yeah, pretty easy going.
Fantastic. Yeah. And if you could meet one of your favorite authors and just have a coffee and a cake in a cafe, who would it be? And what would you ask them?
What would I ask them, and who would it be? Good questions. So, that's a tricky one. What I would like to do is actually, I would like to meet. So, as I said, I like a lot of nerdy books. And one book that I really enjoyed, I think we may or may not get to talking about that later, is called Upstream. And I would love to meet the guy who wrote that book, because I'm just curious about it. Like that book made me feel so validated in a lot of the things that I've been interested in, wanted to learn more about and stuff like that. And so I would just love to have a chat about like what inspired him to write the book, and how did he feel afterwards, after he'd kind of done all that research. Because the book, so I'll tell you the full title of the book if I can find it. It's called Upstream: The Quest to Solve Problems Before They Happen. And in the book, he talks about the fact that it's actually an extremely difficult thing, not just to solve problems before they happen, but to convince people that a problem that hasn't yet happened needs to be solved. And so when I read the book, I felt like a real mix of like, oh, I feel so validated, and also a bit like, ooh. So I mean, I can't solve problems before they happen. Like almost a bit of a disappointment. It's still one of my favorite books, but it kind of left me feeling a bit like, oh, maybe I'm not going to make the difference I want to make in the world. And so I'm curious how he felt after he learned all that. Like, did he feel hopeful? Did it lead? I'm just curious, because I think sometimes you read a book and you make assumptions about, I realize, I don't know how you felt after you finished writing your book, but sometimes you feel a bit anticlimactic. There's so many different emotions that you feel after you finish writing a book. And so I guess that's probably what I'd like to know. Like, how did he actually feel? Did he feel good about it? Did he feel a bit anticlimactic? Did it make him feel like, like, I guess I'd want to know about his journey as well.
Yeah, so that's so good. And obviously with the book, I ask everybody, Safiya, to recommend a book. So this is your book.
Yes. The writer is called Dan Heath.
Fantastic. So we will put that in the show notes for everybody to go and grab. Why did that book have such an impact on you?
So he starts the book with let's call it a parable, because it's a story that's been told, I think, in more than one society, in more than one place, and he just retold it. And it's about these two people who are, let's just say they're having a picnic. Maybe they aren't, who knows, but they're having a picnic by a stream or a river, and they just see a kid floating by in the stream, and they pull the kid out, and they see another kid floating by and they pull the kid out, and they see another kid floating by and they pull the kid out. And then all of a sudden the other person starts to run off. And the first person's like, aren't you going to help me pull these kids out? And the second person's like, I want to go and see who's throwing them in, right? Like, why are they all falling in? And so it's this desire to kind of looking at the world, looking at the society, and thinking to yourself, like, is there a way to preempt some of these things that we are seeing, right? If you live in a community where you see a lot of people are going down a particular road, you could look at intervening down here on the road and be like, what facilities can we provide for people who've gone down this road? And that's important. But equally important, like, can we understand why this is happening like this all the time? Is there anything that we can put up here on the road that will preempt this problem from happening and sort of produce different outcomes altogether, so that this sort of curative thing is not necessary? And as somebody who has spent a long time working in healthcare, still working in healthcare part-time, I think about that so much, because I think about so many of the things that are preventable and how we don't seem to put any effort into preventing them. And so I started to think I was going, like, am I the only person who's seeing this? So when I read the book, it was just it was incredibly validating for me to see that, okay, I'm not mad to think that we could try to deal with things before they, prevent rather than cure. But also he gave so many examples of different types of communities where they've successfully done it, where they've not been able to do it successfully. He talked about the important sort of features in creating these interventions, in terms of maybe you might need some sort of multidisciplinary approach. Like, it's never going to be just one thing that's going to do it. You'll need a team of people who have different backgrounds and who understand different things. And so to me, it was almost like if you had this idea and then you could just like go really deep in it and like learn a lot about it and stuff like that. So that's what it was for me. And like I said, it really gave me, a different perspective around the work that I was doing, full-time at the time in healthcare, and other, voluntary work that I do, other stuff that I do in my community. It just gave me a real sort of insight into how you can design things better and maybe make an impactful difference before things get really bad. So I loved it.
Fantastic. Love it. I've not read that, so I'm going to go check it out. It sounds fascinating.
Put it on your list. It's really good.
I put it on my list. My list is long, Safiya.
Mine too. I've accepted now that I may not read them all. It's fine. Let's just keep putting stuff on it. No problem.
Keep putting stuff on it. I have this conversation with my husband all the time that I don't do bags or shoes, I do books. So we just have to everybody make peace with that.
Just be okay with that.
Yeah, exactly. Safiya, I have absolutely loved chatting to you today. Where can people find you?
So a few places you can find me. My website is SafiyaRobinson.com, pretty easy to find. And it's currently, you know, and I'm sure that there's some business coach out there covering their ears, but it's currently a mishmash of like my personal blog and maybe stuff about writing and maybe recipes that I like I'm pretty out there with what's on there. And so it's a mishmash of all those things. And I'm trying to get a bit more focused with it. Also, I don't want to be focused at all. So it's a bit of a push-pull, but it's my home on the internet. It's like my home on the internet. So if you go there, you're going to get to know me because you're going to realize that there are a lot of things I'm interested in, different things. I'm trying to make it a little bit more streamlined so it's easier to navigate. But yeah, go on there, hit start here and poke around, see what you like. But I also have a project which is more related to the work that I do now, and it's called Writing Black Joy. And it is where I interview, season 1, I was interviewing Black writers with joyful stories because that's something that's just important to me. A long story, possibly for another podcast episode, but I really think it's important. When we talked a bit earlier about, you know, books that may have been written in the past and what may or may not be acceptable. As I was growing up, what I wanted to see was more books, either by Black writers or with Black characters that were the type of books that I wanted to read, and I couldn't find them. And now that I think there's a lot less gatekeepers in terms of self-publishing, but also like you can have a YouTube channel, you can have a podcast, you can do whatever, like I wanted to highlight more of the people who are creating those things. And so it is started off as a writer's gallery. So if you go to writingblackjoy.com, you'll see the different writers there. I've got lots of interviews with them. Recently got my YouTube channel up and going. So go onto YouTube, search Writing Black Joy. And season 2 is going to be coming in February 2022. If it's after 2022, February, just go and look for it. And if it's before that, just join my mailing list and you'll find out about that. So yeah, those are my little internet homes. There's my personal site. You learn about working with me as a coach, editor, whatever. There's Writing Black Joy, where I interview other writers. And then there's my YouTube channel. And hopefully, if all goes according to the plan, it will also be a podcast in February, but
amazing.
Don't quote me on that.
Well, you said it. We want it to happen now, Safiya.
Yes.
It's set in stone. I love all of that. Would you come back again and we can explore your projects? I would love to talk to you about
Sure, we can absolutely do that. I have no problem with that at all. If you're up for a repeat guest, I
am definitely up for a repeat guest. So thank you so much. Go and check out all of Safiya's links. They're all in the show notes. Go and follow her and check out her different homes on the internet.
Yes.
So thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.